Hello, I'm glad you made it here tonight.
In a moment, I'll share a story with you, one meant for your sleep.
This story is made to be heard with your eyes closed, because while you sleep, it goes straight into your subconscious. She is calm but powerful. She will change the way you see the world. It will plant new seeds in your mind, ideas of prosperity.
So lie down there, snuggle up, relax.
Because the balloon is going up now, and history will take you with it.
No one paid much attention to him. Not even the wind seemed interested in acknowledging his presence. He was just the man who walked slowly through the dusty paths, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes always toward the ground. They called him the Stone Man, as if that nickname summed up all there was to know. He lived at the edge of the village, in a small wooden house that creaked when the breeze passed. Each morning he would wake before the sky turned blue, put on the same faded hat, and set out with a canvas bag slung over his shoulder. He walked with intention, but not haste. His eyes scanned the earth, not looking for anything shiny, not for gold or silver, but for the ordinary, the forgotten, the stepped-on stones, small ones, large ones, cracked, chipped, smoothed by the passage of rain or wind. He would pick them up gently, brush off the dirt with the hem of his sleeve, and place them in his bag, as if each one had whispered something only he could hear. He simply returned home, emptied the bag onto a wooden table, and began his ritual. Each stone was washed in warm water, scrubbed with a soft brush, then laid on a cloth to dry beneath the morning sun. After that, he would oil them sometimes with lavender, sometimes with rosemary, depending on what he felt the stone had experienced. And then came the words, whispered softly, carefully, as if he were waking something ancient. "You are remembrance," he would murmur to one. "You are courage," to another. "You carry healing," to a third. These names were not random. Augusto believed each stone came to him for a reason, that beneath the surface of every forgotten object was a fragment of someone, a story someone, who had let go or lost their way. He believed that if you listened carefully, even silence had a message. He began placing the stones in small wooden boxes lined with soft fabric. Each had a handwritten label. Some had short phrases. Others had symbols he had invented himself. He never tried to sell them. He simply left a few by the window, as if hoping the right eyes might notice. And one day they did. A woman from the city, lost on her way to somewhere else, stopped to ask for water. While waiting, her eyes caught the reflection of a stone small, blue, and shaped like a teardrop. She asked about it. Augusto smiled, the way you smile when someone finally understands something you've waited years to say. "That one," he said softly, "is for those who are rebuilding." She took it in her hand. It felt warm. He said no price, only that she give what she felt it was worth. She left money on the table and drove off. A week later, she returned with 2 friends. The week after that, with 6 more. Stories began to spread not about the stones themselves, but about what people felt when they held them. One said it reminded her of her grandmother's voice. Another said it gave her the strength to say goodbye. Another swore she had her first peaceful night of sleep in months after placing the stone beside her bed. Journalists came, photographers, filmmakers. They asked for his process, for secrets. Augusto gave them tea and silence. They made documentaries. People came from other countries. The local newspaper headline read, "The man who turned stones into miracles." His house grew. A shop was built, then a gallery. But Augusto still walked each morning, collecting stones the same way he always had. He still whispered to them, still cleaned them by hand. When asked how he had become so successful, he would simply say, "I never tried to sell stones. I offered people pieces of what they thought they had lost." And that was the truth. Because the stones were never magic on their own. They were reminders, carriers. They held feelings too heavy to say aloud. And Augusto, he simply listened better than most. He knew that real prosperity wasn't found in money or fame or loud accomplishments. It was in quiet acts, in believing when no one else did, in touching the ordinary with care until it revealed the extraordinary. At the end of each day, as the light turned gold and shadows stretched long, Augusto would sit by the edge of his garden. He'd place one stone in the palm of his hand and close his eyes, not to dream of more, but to remember what already was, because true wealth, he believed, was never in the stones themselves. It was always in the way you looked at them. The girl who collected broken stars in a small village where nights arrived without warning, and the stars seemed to fade earlier each year. There lived a little girl named Morena. She wasn't like the others. While the children chased fireflies and played in the dirt, Morena stared at the sky silent, expectant, holding an old glass jar. People said she was strange. "You can't collect stars," they told her. But every night, when the sky cracked with silence, Morena wandered through the fields, whispering to the darkness. His name was Silas. Every afternoon, he walked into the forest behind his home, carrying a notebook and a pencil, but never wrote anything. Instead, he leaned against the bark of trees and closed his eyes. He stayed there for hours, motionless. People said he was odd, but the trees knew better. She wore a blindfold, not out of necessity, but by choice. The world teaches you to see too much, she would say, but not to feel. In her quiet home by the hills, Amara painted in silence, letting her fingers follow the rhythm of her breath, her sorrow, her healing. It divided a village in two, a place where they had tried everything to build a bridge planks, ropes, iron, but everything fell apart. They said the river was cursed, that it didn't want to be crossed. One day, a stranger arrived. He carried no tools, no wood, no plans, a car, just an old notebook and a single question he asked every villager. Do you believe? Most laughed. But there was something in his voice that made even the quiet ones listen. That night, he sat by the river and waited. The next day, he returned, and the next, until a child came and sat beside him. I believe, she whispered, and at that moment, a plank appeared, floating, solid, as if the river itself had given permission. The next day, another voice, another step. The bridge grew with each confession of belief. It wasn't about crossing. It was about knowing something waited on the other side, something worth trusting. When the bridge was complete, it didn't look like wood or stone. It looked like promises light as breath, strong as silence. The stranger left without a name, only a note. Faith is not what you see before the bridge. It's what builds the bridge as you step into the unknown. No one understood her art. The strokes were unpredictable, the shapes unclear. Until one day, someone stood in front of her work and began to cry. That's how my grief feels, he whispered. People came from far away, not to buy her paintings, but to stand before them. They said her colors touched their memories. Her swirls knew their secrets. Amara never explained her process. She simply placed her hand on each heart that lingered in silence and said, "Close your eyes. Feel the truth. That's where healing begins." Her gallery never had titles, only a small sign at the entrance. This art is not to be seen. It is to be remembered. They felt his heart beating with theirs. They understood his stillness. One day, a drought came. The ground cracked, the leaves curled, and everyone feared the forest would die. But Silas walked deeper into the woods, found the oldest tree, and whispered something only the roots could hear. That night, a soft rain began to fall lonely above the forest. By morning, the leaves had turned green again. People asked how. He only smiled and wrote his first words in the notebook. When you listen with your whole being, the world speaks back in blessings, and sometimes, just sometimes, she would find small, glowing fragments lying in a grass, shimmering pieces that pulsed softly in her hands. She called them broken stars. No one believed her, but the jar on her shelf slowly filled with these tiny lights. Each one, she said, was a wish someone gave up on. She would hold them gently, warm them in her palms, and whisper, "You are not forgotten." Over time, her room glowed at night, not from lamps, but from hope reborn. One evening, the stars returned to the sky brighter, closer, almost reachable, and for the first time, the whole village looked up, and they saw what she saw. Because sometimes, what's broken only needs to be held gently until it remembers how to shine. The boy who whispered to trees. There was a boy who didn't speak much, not because he couldn't, but because he preferred to listen. The woman who painted with her eyes closed, Amara, was a painter who never looked at her canvas. The bridge that only appeared when someone believed there was a river, an old river, deep and quiet, almost forgotten by the maps. The girl who was afraid of being remembered there once was a girl named Celine, who never spoke too loudly, never wore bright colors, and never stood too close to anyone. She walked as if she wanted the world to forget her footsteps, and smiled, only with her eyes, quickly, so no one could catch it. People assumed she was shy. Some thought she was strange, but the truth was softer than that. Celine was afraid of being remembered, because in her past, every time she was remembered, she was hurt. The more someone saw her, the more she disappeared inside. So she built a quiet life. She worked in a small flower shop with low light and soft music, where no one asked too many questions. She arranged bouquets for strangers and wrote little notes to go with them, but never signed her name. One day, an old man came into the shop and asked for a bouquet without color. "I want something that says goodbye without sadness," he said. Celine looked at him, surprised. For the first time in years, someone's request mirrored her own heart. She made him a bouquet of white and silver petals, dried lavender, and one single feather. He returned the next day, then the next, always asking for something invisible but unforgettable. Celine began to write different notes, notes that whispered instead of shouted, notes that felt like secrets finally being told. One of them said, "You can be soft and still change the wind." Another, "Being remembered doesn't mean being owned." Slowly, customers returned just to read the notes. And without meaning to, the shop became a place where people left pieces of themselves and Celine. Piece by piece, left pieces of herself, too. One afternoon, a girl brought her a letter. "My mother passed," she said, but she kept one of your notes by her bed. It made her feel seen. Celine held the letter, and her hands trembled. She didn't cry. But that night, for the first time, she signed a note with her name. Just her first name. It was enough, and it was beautiful. Because sometimes, being remembered doesn't mean being trapped. It means someone, somewhere, held a piece of your light and felt less alone. The stone that dreamed of the sea, that stone was different. Not because of its color, though it was blue like the sky after a storm. Not because of its size, it fit perfectly in the palm of one's hand. What made it special was what no one else could see. It was what it carried inside. Lavo found it one morning by the riverbank. It wasn't scattered among the others. It was alone, half buried, glowing softly, as if calling out without making a sound. When he picked it up, he felt a slight vibration It wasn't cold or warm. It was alive. From that day on, that stone was never put up for sale. It sat on a separate shelf above Alavo's head, right beside the stall's window. He called it Marina, and every day, before opening his stall, he would take her in his hands and whisper, "You would have loved the sea." It became a quiet ritual. Almost no one noticed. But if someone paid attention, they'd see how Alavo's eyes would drift away, as if, for a few moments, he too was returning to some distant place. The truth is, Marina wasn't just a stone. She was a memory from a time he never lived, yet missed. Maybe from a past life or a forgotten dream. She carried the scent of salt, the sound of seagulls, and a nameless longing. One day, a woman appeared at the stall. Her hair was messy from the wind, and her feet still wet, as if she had just stepped out of the ocean. She wore a light dress with tiny seashells sewn into the hem. She didn't say much. She simply pointed to the shelf. Her eyes stopped at Marina. "That one," she said softly. Alavo hesitated. The stone had never left. It felt like a part of him, but in that moment, something inside told him it was time. He picked Marina up with care, like handing over a secret. The woman held it as if she remembered her, as if she had waited her entire life for that exact moment. "She reminds me of home," she whispered, "even if I don't know where that is." Alavo just nodded. He didn't ask questions, just smiled. She thanked him and left, walking slowly, clutching the stone to her chest. 2 days later, she returned. She said she had gone to the river and sat there, holding Marina in her hands. She felt the wind shift. A blue butterfly landed on her leg. And then she heard something. It felt like a sound coming from inside the stone. "She wants to leave," she said. "She wants to return to the water." Alavo didn't answer. He simply walked with her to the river. They sat on the edge together. The sky was cloudy, as if it too missed something. The woman held Marina once more, closed her eyes. Then, with a gentle motion, she threw the stone into the river. It sank slowly, without a sound. But just for an instant, a soft blue glow shimmered through the current, as if the river itself smiled. They stayed there in silence until the woman said, "Thank you for keeping her for me." Then she left. That night, Alavo returned home with a strange feeling, an emptiness that didn't hurt, more like a shelf that now had space, like a sigh that had finally been released. The next morning, when he arrived at the stall, he noticed something. Where Marina used to rest, there was now a small seashell, blue, perfect. No one knew how it got there, but Alavo understood. Marina was gone, but she had left a part of herself behind. Inside that shell, he began keeping small notes, handwritten phrases, thoughts about the sea, about letting go, about returning home even without knowing the way. Marina's story spread. People traveled from far away to see the shelf of the shell. Some left their own little messages. Others just looked and quietly walked away. It was as if that space had become a sanctuary for things we must release. And Alavo learned something important, that even stones, when listened to with love, reveal that they too feel longing, that they too want to leave, and that letting them go is sometimes the greatest act of love a person can do. The boy who mended broken skies. He was just a boy with eyes too observant and hands far too small for such delicate work. His name was Luan. He lived in a village tucked between mountains and fields, where the sky seemed closer to the earth's so close it sometimes felt like you could touch it. But something strange had begun to happen. First came tiny tear spots in the sky where the clouds seemed to fray at the edges. Then smudges, as if someone had tried to erase bits of the blue with an invisible eraser. People didn't notice. They rushed through their days, working, running errands, coming and going, without ever looking up. But Luan noticed, and more than that, he felt it. Each flaw in the sky ached inside him, like the world itself was quietly unraveling from neglect. One morning, he climbed the tallest hill in the village, carrying a bag filled with odd things: kite string, masking tape, scraps of fabric, colored glue, and a rickety wooden ladder. He climbed until the wind began to whisper secrets in his ears, then propped the ladder against the sky and reached up with all the gentleness in the world and began to mend it. First with blue thread, then with scraps that mimicked the colors of sunset. He even sketched tiny stars with golden wax crayons. Day after day, he returned, repeating his ritual like a quiet ceremony. Some laughed at him, said he was crazy, that no one could fix the sky. Others just ignored him, but the sky did not. The sky felt him, and slowly the rips began to disappear. The blue returned, deeper and softer, and a different kind of calm settled over the village at night. Children began dreaming more vividly. The elderly hummed old melodies again, and even without knowing why, people began to look up more often. One day, a reporter came to the village. She'd heard rumors of a boy who repaired the sky. She didn't believe it, but curiosity won. She climbed the hill and found Luan with paint-stained hands, a serious face, and a silver ribbon tied around his head. She asked, "Do you really believe you can fix the sky?" And he answered, in a voice soft but steady, "No, but I refuse to leave it broken." That sentence became a headline, and soon the world knew his name. Experts came, psychologists, scientists. They wanted to study the boy, to explain him, to diagnose him. But Luan kept climbing that hill, kept sewing, and the sky kept healing. One day, years later, he didn't show up. The village grew concerned. They searched, and at the top of the hill, they found only his ladder, his bag of threads, and a ribbon of blue fabric blowing in the wind, embroidered in golden thread with a single line: "What is cared for with love does not break so easily." No one saw him again, but every night, when the sky seems just a little more beautiful than it should be, someone in the village whispers, smiling, Luan was here. Because maybe, just maybe, those who learn to mend the sky with tenderness also learn to fly in silence. The woman who lived inside a song, they said she was strange, that she walked too slowly, smiled at nothing, and looked up at the sky as if hearing a secret. Her name was Clara. She lived alone in a little house with blue windows at the end of the most forgotten street in town. But what few knew was that Clara didn't just live in that house. She lived inside a song. Yes, a song that never played on the radio, that had no chorus or title. It was a melody that only played when the world slowed down, when the wind brushed through trees and faraway chimes rang. When someone cried in silence or laughed without meaning to. That music lived with her, and somehow it was the place where she truly belonged. Since she was a child, Clara had heard sounds where no instruments were present. She used to say that emotions had musical notes, that longing was a low C, and that forgiveness sounded like a gentle G in the late afternoon. No one understood. So Clara grew up being called the odd one, the distracted one, too much of a dreamer, but she never stopped listening. Every morning at dawn, she wrote invisible sheet music with her hands in the air, moved her fingers like playing a piano that only she could see. In the afternoon, she went out walking, and with each step, she left a note on the ground. Some people started to notice that wherever Clara had passed, the air felt different, lighter, quieter inside. One day, a mute boy crossed her path in the park. He was crying without sound. Clara stopped, looked into his eyes, and whispered, "Listen here." Then closed her eyes and began to move her hands as she always did. For a moment, the boy seemed to hear something no one else could, and he smiled, a small smile, but complete. It was the first time someone truly witnessed Clara's song. Over time, people began visiting her, not to talk, just to sit near her, to simply be there, in the silence where the music lived. And Clara welcomed them with tea, warm bread, and a gaze that spoke more than words ever could. Then, one day, she was gone, just like that. The house remained untouched, the kettle still warm, but she was no longer there. On the table, only a note, "Thank you for listening." They say that since then, on certain cloudy afternoons, when time seems to slow and the air turns soft, you can hear a simple melody floating through the air. A melody with no lyrics, but one that seems to know your soul. It's Clara, playing from within the song she always called home, and those who listen never hear the world the same way again. The shop that only opened when you were ready. One really knew how long that shop had existed. It had no sign, no display window, no ads. It sat between two old buildings at the end of a dead-end street, and the strangest part, it only appeared to those who were ready. Not ready in the ordinary way, but ready on the inside, as if the heart knew the way before the feet ever moved. Those who entered said they felt immediate relief, a warm silence like a blanket on a cold morning. The lighting inside was soft. Everything smelled of cinnamon tea and polished wood, and there were shelves, endless shelves, filled with small jars, untitled books, and objects that seemed to have been waiting for someone a very long time. And at the back, behind an old wooden counter, sat an old woman with eyes that sparkled and wrinkles shaped like maps. Miss Hope. She never asked names, never asked why you were there. She just looked deeply as if seeing what no one else could. Then she would point to a shelf. "There's what you came for," she'd say, in a voice wrapped in time. Each person found something different. One man took home a blue stone, heavy and cool, inscribed with, "You are stronger than you believe." A young woman discovered a golden key attached to a note that read, "The door you're looking for is within." One older lady left with a bottle of perfume that smelled exactly like her mother's embrace-even, though she had passed away. Years before, nothing was for sale. everything was given. But Miss Hope said one thing to everyone: true prosperity begins when you understand what you're truly searching for. The shop never opened for the hurried, nor the skeptical, nor those demanding answers. It only revealed itself when the soul whispered. And here's the thing: those who returned home with the right object reported changes. Subtle shifts. Locked doors suddenly opened. Unexpected money arrived. Fear faded. Intuition sharpened. Choices felt lighter. It wasn't magic. It was alignment. Miss Hope used to say, when you remember who you are, the universe remembers too. And so, people left with more than objects. They left with permission to prosper, to believe again, to receive without guilt, to dream without fear. No one ever managed to photograph the shop or find its exact location again, but it appeared always at the moment someone stopped running and started trusting. And even today, if you're truly ready, you might one day turn a quiet corner, and it'll be there, waiting with a tiny box made just for you, and a handwritten note that reads, "You already are. Now, allow yourself to receive." The seed that only grew in the dark, she found the seed by chance. It was small, almost invisible, wrapped in a crumpled piece of paper inside an old book at a used book fair. The note read only, "Seed of abundance, but be warned, it only grows." In the dark, the woman smiled, thinking it was just a joke. But there was something in the way the seed glowed, ever so slightly, as if holding ancient secrets. She took it home. She didn't have much: a simple apartment, overdue bills, and a heart tired of trying. Still, she decided to plant it. She prepared a pot with care, even without fully understanding why. And at the end of the day, she did as the note said. She placed the seed in the soil and hid the pot in the back of her closet, in the darkest corner of her home. In the following days, she resisted the urge to check on it. She wanted to see, to control, to get results, as she always had in life. But something inside whispered, "This time, just wait." As the seed rested in the dark, she began to shift without noticing. She started to listen more to silence, to speak more kindly to herself, to give thanks for small things, even on cloudy days. She began repeating phrases that seemed simple, but vibrated differently. "I allow myself to receive. It's okay to be quietly happy. Life hasn't forgotten me. It's preparing me." With each repetition, it was as if invisible. Roots were growing within her. The closet remained closed, but she no longer felt urgency. One day, after a particularly hard week, when everything seemed to fall apart again, she opened the closet door, not out of desperation, but intuition. And there it was, a small sprout, green, alive, delicate. It had grown in the dark, without applause, without witnesses, but with faith. She held the pot in both hands and cried, not from sadness, but from recognition. That seed was her. So many times left aside, so many times ignored on the inside, but still alive, still ready, and now blooming. From that day on, she planted a new seed every month, not to harvest quickly, but to remind herself that abundance often needs darkness to germinate, and that healing doesn't come with noise. It comes with patience, with care, in the quiet that whispers, "You are worthy," even when you think you're not. The notebook that knew your name. They say that in a city hidden beneath the noise of all others, there was a tiny stationery shop. From the outside, nothing stood out. The paint on the sign was peeling, the display window was dusty, and the notebooks inside looked like they had slept through decades. But those who walked in felt something shift. The air was warm, like an old embrace. The scent was of wet paper steeped in tea, and behind the counter stood a woman named Maribel. She didn't sell, she observed. Each person who entered seemed drawn to a single shelf, as if the right notebook had already been waiting for them. There were thick notebooks, thin ones, some with fabric covers, others bound in leather or wood. But the strangest part was that every notebook had one page written. Only one. And on that page was the name of the person who picked it up. No one understood how, and when they asked, Maribel would only say, "They already knew you were coming." A skeptical man opened one and found the line, "Do you still remember what you dreamed of when you were 7? A young woman in crisis read, "It's not that you lost, it's that you haven't yet seen what you were gaining." An old man with shaking hands cried when he read, "She knew you'd do your best." No one knew who wrote those words, but everyone left with something different in their eyes. A calm, a flicker, a remembrance that there was still time. One day, a tired woman walked in. Her eyes were hollow, her steps heavy. She was searching for answers. Maribel pointed to a blue notebook hidden among many. The woman picked it up. She read, and she collapsed into tears. The phrase said, "You don't need to prove yourself. You only need to allow." She took the notebook, wrote in it for years, and every night, before sleeping, she read that line like a whisper into her subconscious. Her life changed, quietly, gently. It changed in silence, the way seeds change once they've already decided to grow. Eventually, she returned to the shop. But Maribel was no longer there. In place of the counter, there was only a mirror, and on the mirror, the same phrase from her notebook, written in lipstick, "You only need to allow." The woman smiled. She placed her notebook back on the shelf and walked out lighter. From that day on, others began to find their names there. Sometimes, what heals you isn't what you understand. It's what you allow. Sometimes, transformation doesn't come from what you say, but from what you finally let yourself hear, even without fully understanding. And there are notebooks that whisper the truth. You just have to listen, slowly. The mirror that didn't show your face, they said that in a village, forgotten by time, there was an old house hidden between crooked trees and thick silence. No one knew exactly who lived there, but one thing was certain. Inside that house, there was a mirror that didn't reflect your face. Curious people came to see if it was a trick, if the glass was flawed, or if it was some kind of hidden magic. But all of them left in silence, strangely moved, because what the mirror showed was not what was outside. It was what lived within, as if the glass held memories. When you approached, you didn't see hair, eyes, or skin. You saw a feeling, a forgotten moment, an old wound that still hurt for no reason, a child you once were, a dream left behind, a scream that never came out, a light you dimmed yourself. Some cried, others just smiled, but everyone understood, without words, that what they saw was real. It was exactly what they needed to see. One day, a young man named Theo found the house He wasn't looking for the mirror. He was looking for himself. Tired, lost, confused, he entered without knocking. The house felt alive. The wooden floor creaked as if it breathed. The air smelled like memory. When Theo stood before the mirror, he saw nothing, no reflection, no emotion, just a blank space, and that hurt the most. He stood there, still. 4 minutes that felt like hours, until the mirror began to fog up from the inside, as if it were crying. Then, slowly, words began to appear in the misted glass. You didn't disappear. You just went quiet for too long. Theo dropped to his knees. He breathed deeply for the first time in days, and there he began to speak to himself. Things he had never said, pain he had buried, dreams he thought were lost. The mirror didn't respond, but it listened, and as he spoke, a soft light began to fill the glass, and finally his reflection returned. But not the face he wore now was the eyes of the boy he once was. The same glow, the same faith, the same unexplained courage. Theo left that house different, not because he understood everything, but because he stopped running. He realized the mirror wasn't there to judge or frighten. It was there to remind him of who he was before the voices outside silenced the voice within. And even now they say the house only appears when your soul is ready to truly see itself, because the mirror that doesn't show faces shows forgotten destinies. The invisible vault where dreams are hidden, they say. We all carry an invisible vault inside our chest, but the secret isn't in what's inside it. It's in how we look at the key. There was a woman named Helena who lived in a quiet village tucked between silent mountains and fields that seemed frozen in time. She was known for her calm presence, but also for her lack of luck. Nothing ever worked out for Helena. The crops yielded little. The prayers she whispered to the sky vanished without echo, and the coins in her drawer never added up to more than 3. Still, she never complained. She rose with the sun, swept the porch, fed the chickens, and at night she sat in her old straw chair to speak with the stars. One day, a very old woman, the kind people aren't sure if they're real or a legend, appeared on the dirt road and handed her a single phrase. You're not poor, Helena. You just locked the vault out of fear of losing what hasn't arrived yet. The woman disappeared like dust at dusk, and those words echoed inside Helena's chest for days. Locked the vault. What vault? She had no gold, no jewelry, not even a box of precious memories. But that night, she had a different dream. She saw a dark room, silent and still, where a golden vault hovered in the air, glowing with soft light. She approached, but couldn't touch it. It was as if something within her whispered, "Not yet." In the following days, she began to see life differently. She stopped chasing what was missing and started caring more deeply for what she already had. She planted flowers by the fence, cleaned her grandmother's old trunk, reread forgotten notes hidden inside dusty books. She began writing kind words on little pieces of paper and placing them in a glass jar. I allow, I receive, I am worthy. Each phrase felt like unlocking something invisible. And slowly, Helena began to notice that good things started to return. A neighbor brought her fruit. A distant cousin sent her a letter with long overdue money. A customer from the city passed by and ordered dozens of her handmade straw baskets. It was as if the universe had only been waiting for Helena to stop hiding from her own abundance. But the biggest shift wasn't outside. It was in the way she looked at herself. One day, standing before the mirror, she whispered, "I don't need to earn it. I already am." That night, she dreamed of the room again. But this time, the vault opened, and inside, there were no coins, no gems, only a mirror. A clean, luminous mirror with one inscription on the frame: "You are the key." From that day on, Helena's life remained simple, but she no longer was. Because now, every small blessing was welcomed with joy, not fear. Every unexpected gift was received with peace, not guilt. Every dream was planted without doubt, like someone who already knows the soil will answer. And slowly, her life became fertile ground, where everything bloomed faster. People began to ask her what her secret was. And with a smile, she would say, "I didn't chase more. I stopped fighting who I already was." Because prosperity isn't about having, it's about allowing. And when you allow with love, even the invisible finds its way back to you. The forgotten notebook of a life yet to happen, they say, that every person is born with an invisible notebook under their arm. Inside, it doesn't hold the facts of life, but the blank spaces, the meetings that haven't happened yet, the dreams we never dared to wish for, the words that one day will still be said. Clara always felt like she was late. She woke up every day with a tightness in her chest, as if the world had already left and she had missed the train. She did everything by the book, studied, worked, took care of others. But in the silence of her pillow, she felt her life hadn't truly started yet. It was all rehearsal, a prologue stretched over years, until one day, while organizing her grandmother's bookshelf, she found an old empty notebook. The cover was simple, faded blue, but something inside pulsed. No writing, not a single line. But there was a note glued to the inside of the cover. "Write what you never had the courage to ask for." She froze. It felt written just for her. That night, Clara opened the notebook. Her hands were shaking. And for the first time, she didn't write what had already happened, but what she wanted to live. She wrote about the house she dreamed of, with wide windows and the smell of cake. She wrote about a love without rush, one that listened and laughed. She wrote about walking barefoot in an open field, unafraid of looking silly. She wrote, and something inside her shifted. With every page, it was as if she allowed herself to truly exist. In the following days, something curious happened. The pain in her back lessened. Dreams returned to her sleep. Ideas came more clearly, and new people showed up. A woman at the market said, "You have a light in your eyes." An old friend reappeared with a travel invitation, and her boss, for the first time, acknowledged her effort. It wasn't magic, it was permission. Clara realized she had spent years with the notebook closed, waiting for someone else to write it. But now she was guiding the pen, and the more she wrote, the more the world responded. One night, she dreamed of a room full of bookshelves. Every person she knew had their own notebook. Some were blank, others scribbled, some torn by urgency, others stained with guilt, but all were waiting to be written with courage. When she woke up, Clara understood. To prosper doesn't mean having more. It means allowing yourself to want. It means no longer surviving, and starting to live with intention. Today, her notebook is almost full, but not with stories of the past. It's filled with possibility, because Clara finally understood life doesn't only happen through what happens to us. It blooms when we dare to write what doesn't exist yet, and trust that the invisible is reading too. The house that accepted gratitude as Pem taught, the top of a quiet hill, stood an old house made of light wood, with wide windows and a porch that embraced the wind. There were no signs, no advertisements, but those who needed it found it. People of all kinds arrived, tired, discouraged, carrying questions the world had refused to answer. They climbed the path in silence, rang the bell gently, and waited. The door was always opened by an old man with a calm voice, linen clothes, and hands that seemed to have touched many pasts. His name was Abel, though few ever asked. He never inquired why someone had come. He only said, "Come in. Stay as long as you need. And when you leave, pay me with whatever you wish to leave behind." That was it. It's a simple room, a clean bed, a serene view. Warm coffee in the morning, soups that smelled like childhood at night, and silence. Not the kind that hurts. The kind that listens with you. The kind that holds memories and slowly breathes out answers. People stayed for a day, sometimes two, a few, for weeks. And when they felt lighter, they left. Upon leaving, they'd place something on the table. An old button, a dried flower, a handwritten note, and the man would simply smile. A young man once left a sketch with the word peace scribbled. An old woman deliberately forgot her mother's necklace. A child offered a chocolate coin and whispered it was his treasure. The house never needed money, but it seemed to grow more beautiful with time. Brighter in the mornings. Plants began to bloom on their own in corners. Those who returned said time behaved differently inside. One day, a journalist found the place. She wanted to write an article, take pictures, but the man refused, said, "This house isn't for those who want to see. It's for those who need to feel." She left, confused, and the house remained off the maps until one day the man passed on. He left a folded note on the table. Prosperity doesn't live in things. It blooms where there's honest exchange. Keep leaving something kind, and it will keep living. Since then, no one has seen the man again, but the house remains. Those who enter feel warmth. Those who leave carry a new wish inside. And on the table, small offerings continue to appear, because true wealth might be just that, a silent flow between giving and receiving, between being and remembering that you already have everything you need. You just forgot where you kept it. The tailor who sewed dreams in a city where the days seemed all the same and people walked staring at the ground. There was a small tailor shop hidden between an old bookstore and a quiet bakery. Inside, there was no sound of machines, nor the hurried rhythm of scissors. The only sound was the calm breathing of an old man sitting by the window, a fine needle in his hands and colorful fabrics folded like secrets on his table. His name was Abilio, but no one called him that. In truth, hardly anyone called him at all. He was simply known as the slow tailor, as if that were a flaw. But what no one knew was that Abilio didn't sew clothes. He sewed dreams. He stitched patiently the desires that others had forgotten. With every stitch, he added intention. With every fold, he placed silence. His fabrics didn't come from stores. They came from memories. His sky blue fabric from someone's first glimpse of the ocean. A dark wine hue from an old embrace that never returned. A soft gold shade from a morning where everything had gone right. He collected these memory fragments floating through the air, and while everyone else slept, he sat with steady hands and peaceful eyes to transform them into small garments. But they were not for the body. They were for the soul. Coats of courage, scarves of patience, cloaks of new beginnings. One night, a girl appeared at his door. She didn't speak much. She only looked with tired eyes that had grown up too fast. Abilio asked nothing. He simply smiled, pulled out a violet fabric that smelled of lavender, and began to sew. Hours later, he handed her a small vest. "It's made of hope that hasn't been born yet," he said. The girl put it on, smiled with her eyes, and left as if she had remembered who she was. After her, others came, people who didn't know what they were looking for, but left with something they didn't know they needed. And Abilio remained there, invisible to the hurried eyes of the world, but essential as a pause. Some said his clothes brought luck, that those who wore them found their path. But he never said that. He knew the secret wasn't in the clothing, but in the time it took to be born. One day, a young businessman came into the shop. He was exhausted, lost, though his watch was expensive. He asked for a suit. He wanted something that showed power. Abilio sewed in silence. He handed over a light blazer made of old linen and words never spoken. The young man looked at it, confused, and said, "But this doesn't look powerful." Abilio smiled. "Wear it, and then tell me." Months later, the man returned, not to ask for another outfit, but to thank him. He had changed his company, his home, his habits. He said that since that day, everything seemed to make sense. Abilio listened and simply said, "You wore what was already inside you. You just needed to remember." And so the workshop remained. No sign, no lines, no noise. Just a warm light in the window and the soft sound of a needle passing through the fabric of the soul. Because deep down, he knew true prosperity isn't dressed in luxury. It wears presence, intention, and dreams carefully stitched in silence. The garden of the hidden. Mind, there was a quiet village where people used to say that each person carried an invisible garden within a place where the seeds of their thoughts would grow. Among the villagers lived Clara, a simple woman with curious eyes and an open heart. Every night before sleep, Clara had a ritual. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and brought to mind an image of abundance. She pictured a golden wheat field, harvesting stalks that shimmered like sunlight. She softly whispered, "I attract prosperity. My subconscious knows the way." These words echoed gently in her inner silence, without hurry, like a familiar melody. During the day, even in small tasks, she remembered that image, believing the field was real, even if invisible. With time, something began to shift. An unexpected job offer arrived. A small investment she had made to learn something new started to bear fruit. But Clara didn't get carried away by excitement. She kept nurturing her mental garden each night, repeating her words softly, keeping her intention clear. One day, sitting on the porch, she noticed how the outside world mirrored her inner state. The people around her became more open. Opportunities began to appear naturally, and doors that were once closed started to open. Everything felt like tiny miracles awakened by the silent power of her mind. Then she recalled the wisdom from an old book she had read long ago. The subconscious responds to what is planted repeatedly and with emotion, even while you sleep. And she understood, without even realizing it, her garden had grown overnight, invisible to the eyes, but real in its essence. The prosperity she was looking for didn't arrive suddenly, nor did it fall from the sky in the form of money. It came through small, silent changes, an idea that became a habit that became energy, and that energy multiplied when the sun rose again that night. As she lay down, Clara opened her arms, as if embracing her inner world, and whispered, "Thank you, my subconscious, for guiding me." And as she drifted into sleep, our garden bloomed once more, because in the silence of a resting mind, the impossible finds a way. The power to create, to heal, and to prosper lives in the seed of our thoughts. All it takes is watering it with faith. Day after day, the house that built itself one really knew how it began. But they said there was a man who lived in a house that never truly existed. His name was Elias, and every day he walked through an empty field with an old notebook in hand. People found it odd. After all, he walked between trees as if invisible walls surrounded him. One day, someone asked, "What do you do out there?" "Every day," Elias replied with a gentle smile in his eyes. "I'm building my house." They laughed, but he didn't. Inside the notebook, he drew rooms, wrote words like warmth, light, shelter. In his mind, he could see open windows, hear the wind fluttering through curtains that didn't yet exist. At night, he'd lie on the ground, close his eyes, and repeat silently, "My house is ready. I live in it." What no one saw was that, while he slept, something within him started to believe. And that belief acted like brick after brick, slowly shaping a structure in the unseen days past. He had no money, no help, no building material, but the idea persisted. Until one day, a woman from the city arrived, looking for someone who knew the land well. Elias guided her. Grateful, she offered him a small payment. With it, he bought his first plank of wood. Later, an old man from the village needed help with a repair. Elias did it with such care that the man recommended him to others. Bit by bit, the house began to take form, not because Elias chased after things, but because something seemed drawn by his quiet certainty. Each plank, each window, every piece seemed to have been prepared long before in his notebook, in his thoughts, in his heart. He didn't call it luck. He called it a response to what he repeated before sleep every night. The house already exists. It's just waiting to reveal itself. When the house was finally complete, it looked old, like it had always been there. Those who entered said they felt peace. They asked how he built it all by himself. Elias simply said, "I didn't build it. My thoughts brought it here." And he returned to his notebook, now drawing new things, because he knew what you plant in the mind with faith blooms in the world with time. And what seemed impossible, simply invisible for a while. The house that grew in silence, she inherited nothing but debt. There weren't even letters to open, just yellowed envelopes, filled with numbers that stole her sleep. Her name was Eliza, and her world was small, a single back room on a cracked lot, where the mold cast shadows even on her thoughts. People said she just needs to accept reality. But Eliza wasn't one to accept much. Her eyes were quiet, but her mind spoke loudly. One night, while washing a chipped plate with cold water, she remembered a phrase her grandfather once told her. Whatever you believe in with deep faith, the world hears in silence. That was all, but it echoed. The next day, she wrote it on paper and taped it to her wall. My house grows with my thoughts. And she began. She thought with intention every single day. As she scrubbed the floor, she imagined new wood in its place. As she folded old clothes, she saw sleek cupboards. As she ate rice with salt, she tasted full dinners with red wine. It wasn't madness. It was practice. A training of faith. Elisa didn't wait for anyone. She borrowed books from the community library about small repairs. She watched videos, made a list. Today, I'll learn to fix the faucet. Then, I'll paint a wall. And so, week after week, part of the house changed. Quietly, little by little, the neighbors began to notice. That crazy girl is fixing up her place alone. But she smiled, because she wasn't alone. Her thoughts were with her. One day, the front wall collapsed after a heavy rain. She sat on the floor and cried. Then she laughed. It was the wrong wall, she said. She rebuilt it, stronger, more beautiful. She started selling cakes in the street, then homemade meals, bought a used fridge, then a freezer. She rented the lot next door, created a community kitchen, and taught other women. It all starts inside. The rest is just consequence. Elisa didn't become rich overnight, but she became rich inside. And over time, that richness translated into numbers. Her house grew. It gained windows, a porch, a garden. It gained life. It gained stories today. She opens the door to those who arrive with tired eyes and says, "Here we rebuild what the mind learned to hide." Because she knows true prosperity doesn't come from what you have,